I laughed, my friend, because that's exactly what I thought. We need Rachel to sing that at the retreat. Truth be told, we need that all the time, don't we? I've got to be very, very careful. I've got to tread very, very lightly this morning. Because if I don't, I will fall into this downward spiral of my uber competitive nature and proving to you that I'm more competitive than you. You see, that was my adolescent, teenage years. And to say that I was uber competitive would be the understatement of the year. In hindsight, it's not something that I'm very proud of. To my soccer friends, it's not something I would encourage you to emulate. I think you'll see and understand why. It was pretty embarrassing when you really think about it. I wasn't a dirty player. I played within the rules. But I knew if I knocked the snot out of you, that you were going to come through that hole a little bit slower next time. And if I knocked the snot out of you again, you were going to be very timid in going through that hole and probably try to bounce it outside. I played within the rules of the game, but if there was anything that I could do to get that competitive advantage, I'd take it. I could introduce you to some guys who are now friends from Peters Township or Bethel Park or Mount Lebanon, and they could tell you stories about how I was living up to being the very player that I dreamt of being, Jack Lambert, Dracula in cleats. I grew up here, after all, when we won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. Or if you want to talk about basketball, I dreamt about being Daryl Dawkins or Moses Malone. You know, those big, intimidating, nearly unstoppable forces. Baseball? Meh. To tell you the truth, I was a great catcher. I had a strong arm, and I had a coach at a very young age who coached me to be a goalie when playing catcher, to keep the ball in front of me. I would beg runners to try to come home when I was blocking the plate. But I was so uber competitive that I stunk at hitting. I mean, come on. When you get out 70% of the time and you're a great player, those odds were just not at all in my favor. I think you get the point. I lived and died on the notion that winning wasn't everything. It was the only thing. My uber competitive nature served me well in college. I worked out all year. I practiced as competitively as I played. But after my 4th knee surgery, when I hung up my cleats, I smoothly applied it to being uber competitive in academia. And instead of being average student, I started to excel. I graduated a 5-year co-op school in 4 years. 2 years, I was co-president of the undergraduate psychology club. I was on the undergraduate curriculum committee, and I did enough brain surgeries on rats that I was published in Neurosciences, studying the dopaminergic pathways of addiction in the brain. I even went to the annual convention in Nolens, parts of it that I do remember. I was on the path to medical school, to become a psychiatrist, the highest in the world of psychology's hierarchy. Truth is, I could go on and on and on. But the truth also is that I burned out. My best friends and roommates would longingly look at me, wanting me to go out and hang out and have fun in this great city of Boston. And when I met up with them a little bit before midnight, because I was studying on Fridays and Saturday nights, they would chuckle and they would shake their heads in disbelief, and we'd raise another glass and have another round. It is so easy to be competitive, isn't it? There are big rewards for being competitive in our culture: status, rank, promotions, paychecks, bragging rights. But what does competition do to our souls, Coach? I can see your smile from here, my friend. One of the things I love the most about Hines Ward, his love for the game. That smile he had. I'll tell you what exactly being competitive does to your soul. It eats that away. Right, Tom? You can't play at that level if you're always on edge. You can't play at those levels. You can't practice at those levels. You can't create at those levels if you're always trying to outdo someone. It wasn't until I was in college that I really started to understand just how toxic and all-encompassing it is. You see, my best friend's girlfriend and I used to go round and round and round in what I now understand was a nauseating game of one-upsmanship. That is, until Chris pulled me aside and encouraged me to let Britain win. Because unbeknownst to me, it was eating at her, eating at him, and dominating all of our time together so much that it was eating at everyone besides me. So I did. It was an aha moment in every single one of those relationships are better because of it. Fast forward half a decade. I got my master's in counseling psych and community mental health while working a demanding 60 to 70-hour work week, supervising therapeutic treatment homes, and my competitive nature crept up again. I was neck and neck with my boss in being number one in our class, something that only he and I were keeping track of. On the verge of going into private practice with some close friends and making the big bucks, I was also getting more and more involved in my home congregation, Westminster Presbyterian Church, just south of South Hills on 19, south of South Hills Village. That's when the next big aha moment happened. I was playing basketball with friends at Westminster's gym 2 to 3 nights a week. And I started to feel this sense of call to the ministry. And I figured I better tamper down my game a little bit. I mean, after all, these are the guys who are going to be approving my call to the ministry. Don't get me wrong, I played as hard as I ever played, but instead of trying to get inside of the opponent's head to get an edge, I started congratulating and encouraging my opponents to play hard and better. Instead of pointing my finger in their face when I had knocked them to the ground, I started offering them my hand to pick them up. It was liberating. It was probably one of the most athletically liberating experiences I ever had. I was playing again with that childlike joy that wouldn't mind taking a timeout from kicking the ball around over there to go sit in some guy's lap. Do you get it? I would have continued practicing, kicking the ball against the hut or the fence, and probably getting in trouble for it. In hindsight, it was without a doubt the most fun I ever had playing any sport since I was real young. After all, it's really not about winning or losing, is it? It was about having fun. It was about getting exercise. It was about building meaningful relationships. At least one night a week, we would go to Fridays after playing ball. I would bring a change of clothes. I was sweating so much, right? We would go to Fridays and grab dinner because I would never eat before a game. Inevitably, one of us would be having difficulty with their kids, with their jobs, or with their marriages. And inevitably, we would end up closing Fridays down, supporting one another, caring for each other, working things out. Something I never would have done before. I finally had my priorities straight. Because of it, to this day, my older brother often asks me, when am I going to have a bar ministry? Calvin Brew, I don't know. Complete shift. There was a tribe of Native Americans who lived along the Mississippi. It was a very swift and very dangerous river where they were. The current was so strong that if someone happened to fall into it or stumble into the river, they were easily swept away downstream. One day, the tribe was attacked by a group of hostile settlers. And they found themselves with their backs against the river. They were greatly outnumbered. Their only chance of escape was to cross the rushing river. So they huddled together. And those who were strong picked up the weak, put them on their shoulders. Little children on their shoulders, the sick on the shoulders, the old and the infirm on their shoulders. Those who were ill or wounded were carried on the backs of those who were the strongest. And they waded their way out into that river. And to their surprise, they discovered that the extra weight on their shoulders, carrying the least and the lowest, helped them keep their footing. and it enabled them to make it safely across the river. Friends, Jesus is trying to teach us that true greatness, that true leadership, and that to be true Christians is the polar opposite from the uber competitive, me first, win at all costs culture as you can possibly get. Rather, it's about putting yourself aside and with childlike joy and love and faith, letting God use you to carry the least and the lowest safely across the river of life. Amen? Amen. Amen.